This week I am going to be an example of how you can practice creative self-care even if you only have a few minutes. And one of the projects that you can do some of today, come back later, or another day if you have another few minutes. I have my inexpensive praying watercolors. I have one page from one of the newer watercolor journals I am testing out for you, as well as my old favorite, which is no longer consistently available. I have them taped down. The reason I have three is so I can give you three options for your base for this week's watercolor project. I won't be using my water spray bottle today to activate my paints because I'll only be working with green and the two primaries that make it up. I have a container of water, which is two-sided. I really would like to try the bowl and cup method, I would call it, or bowl and smaller bowl, because I think it would be cute and it takes up less space where you have a bowl of clean water with something narrower inside with clean water. So you have one to rinse your brush and the other to get clean water. I am using one of my largest gravy watercolor brush for the first time. I have loved using the smaller ones. They will be included in the materials I link to in the description. And I also have my typical smaller brushes. Because having multiple size brushes could be convenient and add a different layer to this project, but are not necessary. So for our options for this week's project, one more thing. I do have one of my botanic sketches from earlier this year. I'll link to the video for inspiration. For a template, I'll get to later. To start, we need a watercolor background. I'll give you three different options that you can use how you see fit or do something else. For this one, I will use plastic wrap. You could use the piece of a bag, whatever thin plastic you have around. Plastic wrap works great, and I have worked with this in the past. My paint and my water are set up awkwardly right now because of the extra space the other part of the journals take, but that's okay. I'm wetting my green and my yellow and my blue. And I just realized how much color I still have left in my mixing lid, which is okay. This one is green and blue, so I will use that one because I do find the inexpensive watercolor greens on the violent side. They're very bright. So the first thing I'm going to do is, I've already taped on my pages. I'm just going to lay down clean water. You could also put the paint down on dry paper. I just like to let it run through the water, and it's a lot of fun to watch too. Here's an example of how bright that green can be, but it is spreading out nicely. We don't want this layer too dark. And as you can see, it does spread interestingly through the water. I think it adds another interesting dynamic to working with watercolor, wet on wet. I may be a little too wet, which will make it take longer to dry, but that's okay. You may have noticed the colors on the edge that I have my pages taped to is one of the palette papers from my 100 Days of Mixed Media Fun. I'm just going to put this down on the paper, on the wet paint, and make sure it's nice and crumpled and touching in various places, and then leave that to dry. This corner is a little too squunchy, but that's okay. Get down another wash on this page, which I didn't fully rinse out the brush, but that's okay because we're just working with the same colors. So I guess technically I didn't really need separate rinse and clean water. Well, yes, because I could be picking up blue, and as you see, I already got blue in my yellow, which can be easily dealt with later. I'll throw some yellow in here since I didn't really. And the depth of color here is much more significant, if you will, than the first one, which may make the effect not as dramatic. Looks like the page is going to be a little white in places. So on this one, I'm using salt. I'll use table salt at the top. And I have, of course, kosher salt for the bottom, which may already be a little dry. And I am working my way across this way specifically so that I will be able to work on this page even if the others still aren't dry. But as I very soon need to change my shirt and go to a meeting, let's try this with completely clean water. Oh, well, it would be clean water if I thoroughly rinsed my brush, but that's kind of funny. And I'm kind of scattered, which, well, is definitely not without precedent. So this one, just laying down the color, and we'll just leave this one to dry without any additional enhancement, if you will. I can say I wish I had gotten more pigment on this one, but that's okay. And you will get to see different options depending on how much time you have, what effect you prefer. All right. So we are going to be working with leaves. I guess I should tone back the blue a little bit. Oh, wow, that is way too much yellow. I'm not used to working with bigger, gorgeous brushes like this typically. But you know what? That's kind of interesting. And as it has a nice springy look, that lighter green, I'm going to not mess with that much. I am, however, going to blot up some of the edges with my handy shop towel. These are great for the studio, but again, like the medical exam paper I've mentioned in my 100 days of mixed media fun, these I bought in a case. So they're going to last me a long time because unlike paper towels, you can get way more use out of these. Well, unlike traditional kitchen paper towels, shop towels are great to reuse. All right, friends. I need to go change out of my, let's see, Better with Art sweatshirt. I really like how this wash turned out. Now I'll wipe off the salt to show you this effect. I won't take off the plastic wrap yet because I'm not totally sure that's dry. Oh, dang. Nope, it's... oh well. You can see how the salt leaves an interesting pattern, as does the plastic wrap. That would actually lend itself quite well to this week's project, but it is slightly damp. So I will start with the untextured background. I have a springy leaf template, a watercolor pencil, which isn't necessary, but I think it'll be a convenient way to do this, as well as a smaller paintbrush. So this will be a watercolor layer project, using layers to create depth. If you want to take a look at how I've done this previously with a simpler shape, I will link to that in the description. So first, traced some leaves, and I meant to let there be a way to add a stem, because I did like that in the inspiration for this video. I went with a much simpler leaf than the inspiration, which will be linked in the description if I didn't already say that, but I think I did. I have a headache. I almost thought I would just have to say, hey, this week I'm dialing it back. Enjoy making a watercolor background, but I'm back. And tracing leaves. I mentioned earlier about spring green, and yes, that is a big motivation for choosing this project, is the desire to have green back. I did flip my leaf over to give a little variety, though it's kind of similar both ways. We still have a lot of snow on the ground. And it's very definitely freezing again. So next is to reactivate my green. I will use the spray bottle this time since I'm working with a smaller brush. It'll make it easier. And I'm going to add a little bit more water to this because I don't want to go too dark too fast. And now I just paint around all of the leaves. I switched to a slightly larger brush. After the first leaf layer is dry, it's time to add another layer of leaves. And basically we are working our way down. So we don't want any of our new leaves to cross our top leaves. The interesting aspect of this project is our first layer, which we would typically think of as a background layer, becomes the foreground as we work our way through our layers. So now the goal is to paint around every leaf. And I'll make my paint a little darker. So now the goal is to be sure we don't paint over any of our new leaves or our first leaves. I'd like to try to get a little more variation in color back in. I feel like my last layer was kind of flat. I probably should have worked from the top down, so I'm not holding my hand over wet stuff. So I'm going to start over from the top edge of my paper. But again, the important thing is to paint around both our first layer of leaves, which will be in our finished piece, the top, and our next layer. As I mentioned when I started the second layer, Each layer needs to be dry before you add the next. And with layers like this that don't have any texture that needs to dry, like the salt or the plastic wrap, you can use a hairdryer or heat tool. I used my hairdryer. Again, we're putting on another layer of leaves that need to not cross over any of our other leaves because they are, in the end result, a lower layer. So I will get a slightly darker green. Take it as many layers as you have room for. I'm going to add a little bit of black to this layer to create a little more contrast. Another benefit of using the shop towel or paper towel, if that's what you have, is some more texture on later layers. And oops. So it's another project to take as much time as you have, or to be able to do in as little. I'll be back next week with another creative self-care small art prompt. And midweek with my current 100-day project of 100 days of mixed media fun. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. Hit the notification bell if you really don't want to miss anything. Give me a like if you are feeling inspired to make some art. If you're interested in my very cool Better with Art, Have You Taken an Art Break Today sweatshirt, you can find them in my Fourth Wall shop, which is linked on my channel and with my videos. I'm also wearing my art pants. They are my favorite pants to wear in the studio. Whatever else you do or don't do this week, take some time to make art. It's not a waste of time. It's important to our mental health, and our mental health is important. Feel free to share this video with someone else who needs that reminder. And make art, because we are better with art. And you can see, based on how this top layer looks, how having some added texture could be a real benefit. You can also, if you'd like, add some details to your leaves, some veining. All in all, this is a fun, relaxing project that also increases our watercolor skill. And I'll say it again, make art, because we are better with art.